If I'd burned those logbooks like I almost did the winter the bunkhouse stove went out, I could have just been mad instead of right. 40 years of pasture records, every week logged in my own cramped handwriting, and I nearly fed 'em to the kindling because I was cold and 63 and nobody was ever going to read 'em again. But I didn't. And now a dead man's mail was asking me to confirm something I knew never happened, on ground I'd walked since before the boy who did this was born. My name is Marianne Calder. For 38 years, I have been foreman of Redtail Ranch, though foreman has always been too square a word for the job. I have pulled calves at 3 a.m, argued with hay brokers, doctored windmills with baling wire, buried 2 good horses, fired 1 drunk nephew, and explained to 3 generations of owners that grass is not a bank account. You do not withdraw from it because you feel poor. You take what it can give, and you leave enough that it wants you back. The certified letter came on a Tuesday in late March, tucked between a mineral supplement invoice and a seed catalog somebody at the post office still thought old Mr. Russell Vane needed. Russell had been dead 2 years. I signed for the letter because I sign for everything that comes through that office door. I was probably not supposed to open a dead man's mail, but I'd been signing for Russell's catalogs and bills for 2 years, and nobody at the post office had complained. Russell's widow had moved to Oregon after the funeral, and his son, Peter, had inherited the ranch and kept me on with all my old authorities, because, in his words, nobody knows what this place is without you, Aunt Marianne. He wasn't my nephew. I had just known him since he was 15 and skinny as a fence post, sent out from Denver every summer because Russell thought a boy with soft hands and too much cleverness needed something real under his boots. I taught him how to judge a storm by the smell of dust, how to set a gate so it swung instead of sagged, how to read a pasture map without pretending the paper knew more than the ground. He learned fast. That was the trouble with Peter. He learned everything fast, and some things only halfway. The envelope was from the State Conservation Office. I opened it with the old bone-handled knife Russell used to keep in the pencil jar. The letter inside was polite and printed on good paper. Dear Mr. Vane, as part of the annual compliance review for Conservation Easement Credit Parcel H17, High Ridge Grazing Exclusion Zone, please confirm continued livestock exclusion and non-use status for the designated parcel for the current reporting period. I read the sentence twice. Then I took off my glasses, cleaned them on my shirt, and read it a 3rd time. Because sometimes age will make a fool of you if you let it. High Ridge Grazing Exclusion Zone. There had never been a grazing exclusion zone on the High Ridge. Not under Russell, not under his father, not under the Spanish Grant families whose names still stuck to our draws and tanks. The High Ridge was thin country, yes, windy and mean in August, but it carried pears in spring when the lower flats were too wet, and we had rotated yearlings through it as recently as the previous May. I knew because I had put them there. I sat at Russell's desk, now Peter's desk, though Peter had replaced the scarred oak top with something sleek and gray that looked like it belonged in a dentist's office. The office remodel had happened the winter after Russell died. New cabinets, new computer, new light fixtures so bright they made old maps look accused. Peter had stood in the doorway with his sleeves rolled up, watching 2 hired men toss file boxes into a dumpster behind the barn. Fresh start, he'd said. I had said nothing, because the records that mattered were not in those boxes. The letter asked for Russell Vane's signature by April 15. There was a parcel number, H17, and a reference to an easement map recorded 18 months earlier. 18 months earlier, Russell had been 6 months in the ground, and Peter had been taking phone calls outside the chapel because his company in California was apparently in a liquidity squeeze, which sounded to me like a city way of saying out of money. I did not call Peter right then. That is one thing age has given me. A younger woman might have picked up the phone and demanded an explanation. A younger woman might have wanted the heat of hearing him stumble. I have learned that when something does not fit, you do not shake it. You set it on the table and walk around it until you can see its shape. So I folded the letter back into its envelope, put it in the top drawer, and drove out to the high ridge. The road up there is not much of a road after the second cattle guard. Just 2 ruts through grama grass and shale, with prickly pear waiting to punish sloppy tires. I took the old white feed truck because it has 4-wheel drive and no dignity left to lose. The ridge was green that week, in the small, temporary way our country gets green, as if it knows better than to make promises. Meadowlarks were shouting from the fence posts. The stock pond below the saddle held water from the last storm, cloudy and brown and ringed with hoofprints. That was when I saw the fence. It cut straight through the middle of the pond, like a scar that didn't know what it was cutting. High tensile, 5 strands, brand new, steel T-posts still bright at the tops. I had never seen it before, and I was the one who ordered every roll of wire on the place. It came down from the north rim, crossed the pond at an angle, and climbed toward a stand of juniper. No rancher who wanted to manage cattle would build a fence that way. You either fence water in, fence it out, or make a lane. You do not slice a stock pond in half so animals can bog themselves at the wire and tear it loose first thunderstorm. I got out, shut the truck door quietly, and stood with my hands on my hips. "Peter," I said to the wind, because there are times you say a name just to hear how much disappointment fits inside it. Then I pulled out my phone. I am not a technical woman, but I can use what I need. Peter had made us all download the county GIS app the year he inherited, said it would help with asset visibility. I had mostly used it to find parcel boundaries when hunters lied about where they'd parked. My thumb was stiff and the screen glared, but after a few tries, I brought up the overlay map. There it was, parcel H17, a green boundary line shaped like a bent elbow. The new fence followed it exactly. Not approximately, not like someone had used an old survey and missed the pond by accident. Exactly. The official conservation boundary ran through the water, and the new fence had been built to make the land pretend the map was true. I took photographs from 4 angles. The phone saved the time and location on its own, which Peter had once explained to me with the patience of a boy teaching his grandmother the television remote. I took close-ups of the new clips, the cut bank, the old hoof-worn trail leading right into the pond. Then I took one wide shot with the ridge behind it, and my truck in the frame, so no one could say I had photographed some other poor fool's bad fence. Back at the office, I looked up the ranch charge account. No high-tensile wire order, no contractor invoice, no note in the work log. At noon, I ate my sandwich at the bunkhouse table. Peter used to sit across from me there when he was a boy, long legs tangled under the bench, asking questions faster than I could answer. Once, when he was 17, I taught him to tie a bowline, using the salt shaker as a fence post. He got it wrong 4 times, and then right forever. A knot you can trust, I told him, even after it's carried weight. That day, I unwrapped my sandwich and looked at the empty bench. I had a ridiculous urge to call him anyway, to give him a chance to say there had been a mistake, a consultant, some paperwork language I did not understand. But the fence was not paperwork. The fence had posts. My first real move was not toward Peter. It was toward the well house. The old well house sits west of the barn, a square limestone building with a tin roof and a door that sticks in wet weather. There is a newer pump now and a pressure tank painted blue, but beneath the gravel floor, under a foot of packed caliche, is a fire safe no auditor, remodeler, or ambitious heir has ever listed on an inventory. My predecessor, Sam Ortega, buried it during the Johnson administration after a lightning strike burned the ranch office to the foundation. Sam believed in copies, but he believed more in hiding the copies from "Paper's no good if the wrong man knows where it sleeps," he told me. I added my own logs to that safe for decades. Pasture rotation, calving notes, rainfall, mineral placement, invasive thistle, pond levels, which gates needed chains, which bulls jumped fences, which pastures rested and which did not. Not because anyone asked for such detail, because the land had a memory, and my job was to write it down before men with plans forgot. Peter had helped me dig it up once, years earlier, after a pipe burst and we wanted to check old well notes. He was 17, sunburned, cocky, and delighted by the drama of a buried safe. "Feels like treasure," he'd said. "Responsibility usually does to boys," I said. He dropped one corner on a rock and put a dent in the side. I gave him grief about it for years. I found the dent with my fingertips before I got the lid clear. Digging is different at 65. Your back negotiates every shovelful. I had to stop twice and lean on the handle until the spots left my eyes. But by late afternoon, the safe was on the floor, dusty and stubborn, and the little key Sam had given me still worked. Inside were oilcloth bundles tied with baling twine, logbooks. My handwriting changed through the years, from sharp and upright to cramped and leaning, but the habit stayed the same. Date on the left, pasture name, head count, grass condition, water, notes. I carried the books to the truck in 2 loads. Then I locked the well house, drove home to the small foreman's cottage, and spread them across my kitchen table. Sam's book started in 1965. Mine ran from 1985 till now. Together, they held the ranch's whole memory of grass. The high ridge appeared under different names in the older books. North Ridge, H-Top, Ridge Spring. Sam had used pencil until 1981. I used black pen because pencil smears if you cry over it, and ranching gives you enough chances to learn that. I started with the 10 years the letter referenced. The conservation easement filing claimed the high ridge had been excluded from grazing continuously since 1998. That phrase matters: continuous non-use. It was the kind of language people use when they want land to qualify for programs meant to protect recovering native grassland or riparian habitat. I am not against conservation. I have rested pastures longer than owners wanted, moved cattle off nesting grounds, fenced springs, and spent my own Saturdays pulling old wire out of draws so antelope could pass. Good stewardship is not a slogan. It is work with blisters on it. But the high ridge had not been unused. April 2004, 118 cow-calf pairs moved from South Flat after flood. Grass fair, western wheat coming. May 2005, 72 yearlings, 10 days only, pond full, watch larkspur. March 2007, pairs staged on ridge before branding, pull by 4-2 if wind holds. June 2009, rest Lower Creek, rotate 96 pairs to H17. Salt West Side. The entries went on, week by week, season by season. The high ridge had carried livestock for 32 of the last 40 years. Not abused, not stripped, but used, rotated, managed. Exactly the way Russell wanted it, and exactly the way I had taught Peter to understand it. I marked pages with slips of feed store receipts because they were handy. By midnight, my table looked like a paper porcupine. At 1 a.m, I found the entry that made me sit back. May 12th, 2019. Peter rode High Ridge with MC. Asked about exclusion eligibility. Told him no. Active rotation, pond use, old trails visible. Explained fallow doesn't equal rested. He said, "So if nobody wrote it down, who'd know?" Told him I wrote it down. I remembered the conversation then. He had been home after one of his company's bad quarters, though he had not called it that at the time. He had flown in for his mother's birthday and stayed on, restless and asking the kind of questions men ask when they are measuring things for sale. We rode the ridge because he said investors liked photographs of heritage operations. He asked questions about easements and carbon credits and whether land could earn money by being underutilized. I told him underutilized was a word people used when they had not learned the use. He laughed. I thought he was teasing. So if nobody wrote it down, who'd know? He had said. I had tapped the horn of my saddle. The grass, the water, me. I wrote it in the log that night because Peter asking a good question always pleased me. Now that line sat on my kitchen table like a nail point up. The next morning, I drove to the county library in town, where the copier still takes dimes and the librarian, Mrs. Beale, knows better than to ask questions before coffee. I copied 10 sequential years of High Ridge entries, plus the 2019 note. I copied the front covers of the logbooks and the pages before and after each entry, so no one could claim I had plucked loose lines from nowhere. Mrs. Beale watched me feed page after page onto the glass. "Genealogy?" she asked. "Something like that," I said. She gave me a look over her glasses. "That machine jams if you lie to it." "It'll be fine then." It jammed anyway, because machines have no respect for moral clarity. By noon, I had a folder of photocopies, a thumb drive of scanned pages, because Mrs. Beale insisted I join the century, and a receipt for $14.80. I wrote the date on the folder and put it behind the seat of my truck, under a horse blanket. Only then did I call Peter. He answered on the fourth ring, breathless. "Aunt Marianne, hey, I'm between calls. Everything okay?" That voice still had the boy in it, if I did not listen too hard. "I got a certified letter from the state," I said. Silence. Not long, half a beat. But if you spend your life around animals, you learn the difference between pause and freeze. "What kind of letter?" "Conservation Office, High Ridge Exclusion Zone, addressed to your father." He exhaled in a way meant to sound annoyed. "Oh, yeah, that's just annual compliance stuff. I meant to tell you." "You meant to tell the foreman there's a conservation easement on land she manages?" "It's not a big deal operationally. There's a fence through the stock pond." Another silence. This one was longer. "We had to align the boundary," he said. "With what?" "With the recorded parcel map." "Who built it?" "A contractor." "Paid from where?" "Marianne," his voice sharpened. "I don't need to run every capital improvement through you." There it was. Not Aunt Marianne. Just Marianne. "No," I said. "You only need to run the ones that cut water in half." He made a tired sound. "Look, I know it seems weird, but this is how modern land management works. There are programs now, credits, stewardship markets. Dad left a lot of value on the table. Your father left grass on the ground. And debt in the books," he snapped. And that was the first honest thing he said, and he seemed to regret it as soon as it left him. I stood in the office with the receiver pressed to my ear and watched a fly batter itself against the window. "What debt?" I asked.
"I have another call. Peter. I'll be there Friday. Don't send anything back to the state. I'll handle it." He hung up. Do not send anything back to the state. That told me more than any explanation would have. I put the receiver down and did not move for a minute. Anger came late. First came grief, which irritated me because grief is slow and I had chores. Anger would have been more useful. Anger can load mineral blocks. At 3 that afternoon, Nora Pike came into the office carrying payroll sheets. Nora had been the ranch bookkeeper since Russell's knees went bad. She was younger than me by 20 years, wore turquoise earrings shaped like little birds, and could make QuickBooks confess sins under threat of boredom. She had a daughter at community college and no patience for men who used cash flow to mean surprise. She set the payroll on the desk and looked at the certified letter lying beside my elbow. "So you saw it," she said. I looked up. Nora's mouth tightened. I wondered when something official would come. "What do you know?" She shut the office door behind her. That was Nora's choice, not mine. I did not ask her to risk her job, and I would not have blamed her if she walked back out. She sat in the chair across from me and folded her hands. "Peter told me the easement credits were legitimate," she said. "He said the consultants handled eligibility. I process deposits, Marianne. I don't certify grass." "How much?"
$246,000, first tranche. Carbon offset credits. Some compliance buyer in California. I recognized the name from the investor list Peter left on the printer once. There was supposed to be another after compliance review. The number landed heavy, but not unexpected. Fraud usually has a price tag. That is how men convince themselves it is business. Nora glanced at the door. There's also a loan, not ranch operating debt. Personal, but secured against his membership interest and some land equity after the estate settled. I only saw it because the lender sent a notice here by mistake, and Peter asked me to scan it.
His company failed last year, quietly. He's been paying people with other people's patience. Her voice softened despite herself. I think he thought he could bridge it, use the credits, keep the ranch intact, pay off the startup mess, and no one would be hurt. No one except the land. And the buyers of the credits, and the state, and me when I signed off on deposits not knowing what they were tied to. She looked sick then. Nora was not sentimental about ranching, but she was honest in the practical way of women who reconcile accounts. She did not want to be near a lie that could make her numbers dirty. Do you have copies? I asked. She shook her head. Not ones I'm giving you. I'm not stealing files or handing over banking records without a subpoena. But I can tell you what I saw, and I can tell the auditor the same if asked. I already made myself a memo with dates while it was fresh. That's mine.
That was the meaningful thing she did. She drew her line in a place she could stand on. She would not raid Peter's records for me. She would not pretend she had seen nothing. Fair, I said. She studied me. What are you going to do? Ask the state to look at the parcel. That's all? That's enough. She gave a small laugh without humor. You always were terrifying when you got calm. I was not calm. I was simply old enough to know the difference between revenge and repair. Peter came Friday in a rental SUV that had never met mud and did not enjoy the introduction. He wore a quilted vest over a white shirt and expensive boots scuffed just enough to look chosen. When he stepped into the office, I saw how tired he was. Not movie tired, real tired. Gray under the eyes, jaw too tight, hair needing a cut. For one foolish second, I wanted to feed him. Then he put a folder on the desk like he was closing a deal. I've brought the map, he said. I've seen the map. Okay, then you understand the fence. I understand somebody made the ground match a lie. His face changed. The polished part dropped away. Don't do that, he said. Do what? Make this poetic. It's a compliance designation. It's a grazing exclusion zone on a grazed pasture. He paced once to the window, then back. The ridge is marginal. You said that yourself. Marginal isn't unused. It should have been rested. But it wasn't. Because Dad refused to modernize anything, he burst out. He left me a ranch with sentimental value and no liquidity. Do you know what taxes are? Deferred maintenance? Do you know what it costs to keep this place from being chopped into ranchettes by people who want a view and a barn wedding? I know what posts cost, I said. I know what hay costs. I know what it costs to fix the north well after you deferred it until the pump burned out. He flinched. Good. He should. I was trying to save it, he said. There was the boy again, angry because the world would not admire his intention. By forging your father's compliance? I didn't forge anything. The letter is addressed to him. That's the state database lagging. The initial easement paperwork was filed through the estate transition. Attorneys handled signatures. Your father was dead. Electronic authorization is complicated. Grass isn't. He rubbed both hands over his face. For a moment, he looked 15, stranded in a body that owed too much money. I needed time, he said. The credits were supposed to be a bridge. My company folded, okay? I had investors threatening suits, lenders calling. If I lost the ranch too, everything Dad built... Russell built this by not taking what wasn't his. His mouth twisted. Dad built this by underpaying people like you and pretending honor was a retirement plan. That one found flesh, because it was not wholly false. Russell had paid me fairly enough for a ranch job, which is to say, less than my back was worth. He gave me the cottage, beef, health insurance once Nora shamed him into it, and a place I loved enough to confuse with security. I had no pension besides savings and Social Security, and the stubborn hope that I would die before I became inconvenient. Peter knew that. He knew every soft board in the floor. "You're not wrong that this place has asked more than it gave sometimes," I said. "But that doesn't make your lie true." He leaned on the desk, closer now. "If the state reviews this, they can revoke the credits. They can claw back money. They can trigger penalties we can't absorb. I'd have to sell part of the ranch. You should have thought of that before you sold what didn't qualify. I thought the ridge qualified enough. There it is. What? Enough." He looked away. I opened the drawer and took out the certified letter. I did not show him the log copies. Not yet. Not because I wanted drama, but because I wanted him to make one clean choice without knowing how trapped he was.
"Call the state," I said. "Tell them the parcel needs reevaluation. Return the money if you have to. Get ahead of it." His laugh was small and bitter. "That's not how the world works." It could, for about another 10 minutes. He stared at me, and I saw him calculating. Not whether I was right, whether I had proof. "You don't have the old records," he said. I felt something in me go still. The office remodel, the dumpster, the fresh start. He had not forgotten the logs might matter. He had believed they were gone. "You watch those boxes go out," he said, more to himself than to me. Everything before 2010 was paper. I could have told him then about the well house, about the safe he had dented with his own careless hands. I could have reminded him of the day he learned where water came from. Instead, I said, "You have until the water rights inspection." His eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm not arguing with you anymore." "Marianne, if you interfere with a recorded easement transaction, you could expose the ranch to—" "No," I said. "You expose the ranch." She declined. "Let's start with the north diversion." We spent the morning moving from point to point. Peter talked too much. He used words like sustainability, dynamic stewardship, conservation alignment. Selma wrote things down and asked plain questions. How many head watered here? When was the lower pond dredged? Who maintained the east pipeline? When she asked me, I answered. When she asked Peter, I let him answer. Near 11, we reached the High Ridge stock pond. Selma stopped at the fence. To her credit, she did not say, "What the hell?" though her face suggested she had considered it. Peter launched in. "This boundary reflects the H-17 conservation designation. We're in the process of adapting legacy infrastructure to the new easement conditions." Selma looked at the wire running through the pond, then at the hoof prints pressed deep in the mud on both sides. "Recent livestock use?" she asked. "Residual sign," Peter said, "from before exclusion." I reached into the cab of my truck and took out the folder. "Miss Ortiz," I said, "I received a compliance letter for this parcel addressed to Russell Vane. I'm the ranch foreman and authorized mail handler. I believe the parcel was recorded under an incorrect non-use history. I'm asking that eligibility be reevaluated." Peter went white around the mouth. "Marianne." I handed Selma the certified letter first, not the dramatic piece, the official one, the dead man's mail. She read it, expression unchanged. Then I handed her the photocopies, 10 sequential years of rotation log entries, the 2019 note, the pages before and after, a simple cover sheet Nora had helped me type, listing the original logbooks by year and where I had them secured. "These are my work logs," I said.
Originals available for inspection. They show high-ridge grazing during the claimed continuous non-use window. I also have photographs of the fence installation, time-stamped and location tagged, taken March 22. Selma took the folder with both hands. That is a small thing, but I noticed. She treated it like evidence, not like an old woman's complaint.
Peter stepped toward her. Those are informal notes. They're not certified records.
Selma looked at him. Mr. Vane, please don't characterize documents I haven't reviewed. He stopped. I took out my phone and showed her the photographs. The fence, the pond, the boundary overlay. She did not touch my phone. She asked me to email them to her official address, which I did while standing there with one bar of service and a prayer. The email spun for nearly a minute before it sent. Peter watched it go like a man watching a gate swing shut. Selma closed the folder. I'm going to suspend today's sign-off on H-17 pending review. This is outside the water inspection, Peter said. The compliance issue is now before our office, she replied. There are financial instruments tied to that designation. I assumed there might be. His voice dropped. Do you understand what you're doing? Selma's eyes moved from him to me and back. My job. No one shouted. No one threw a punch. The next 2 months were not satisfying in the way people imagine justice should be. There were emails, there were certified copies, there were requests for original log inspection, which I accommodated at the ranch office with Nora present and the logbooks numbered on the table. Selma wore cotton gloves. Peter's attorney wore boots too clean for April and asked whether my records were personal recollections. They're contemporaneous pasture logs, Selma said before I could answer. I liked her for that. The state compared my entries to old vaccination schedules, mineral invoices, and brand inspection records already in county files. They did not need me to be perfect. They needed the truth to have weight from more than one direction. And it did. Cattle had been on the high ridge, repeatedly, during the exact years Peter's filing claimed continuous exclusion. Nora made her choice formal when the state asked about easement credit deposits. She did not hand me anything behind Peter's back. She responded through the ranch accountant with dates and account descriptions she had processed as part of her job. Later, she told me she had thrown up in the courthouse bathroom after signing her statement. Still did it, I said. Still hate it, she said. That's allowed. Peter stopped coming to the ranch, except when required. When he did come, he avoided the bunkhouse, the well house, the ridge, and me. Once, I saw him standing by Russell's old saddle in the tack room, touching the horn with 2 fingers. I backed away before he saw me. There are some griefs you do not interrupt, even when the grieving man caused them. In June, the state issued its determination. Parcel H-17 had not qualified for the conservation easement credits as filed. The credits were revoked. The remaining tranche was canceled. The first payment had to be returned through a settlement with the credit purchaser. Because Peter cooperated after the evidence review, and because the state could prove misrepresentation more easily than intent to forge, the matter resolved without prosecution. But not without cost. He paid penalties. The personal lender got loud. A strip of non-core acreage near the highway went up for sale to cover what had to be covered. Not the high ridge. That was the part I cared about. As part of the settlement, the easement claim on H-17 was released, and a stewardship board was formed for future conservation filings and land use changes on Redtail Ranch. 1 seat went to Peter as owner, 1 to the state-approved range consultant, 1 to a local conservation district representative, and 1 to the acting ranch foreman. When Selma called to ask if I would serve, I almost laughed. I'm not much for boards, I said. I've noticed, she replied. That's one reason we want you. Peter did not object, at least not in any way that reached me. The first board meeting took place in the remodeled office under lights too bright for old maps. Peter sat across from me in a blue shirt, thinner than he had been in March. He looked at the agenda, not at me. When the consultant suggested resting the high ridge for 2 full seasons, not because of fake history, but because it needed it after a dry spell. I agreed. Peter's head came up. "You agree?" he asked. "If the grass needs rest, it rests." His face did something complicated. "That's what I was trying to—" "No," I said, not unkindly. "Don't." He closed his mouth. After the meeting, he lingered while the others left. Nora had put a plate of cookies on the side table because Nora believes civilization is mostly snacks and accurate spreadsheets. Peter picked one up, broke it in half, and did not eat it. "I did think I was saving it," he said. "I know. That doesn't help as much as I thought it would. It won't." He looked toward the window, where the afternoon light lay over the yard and the barn cats moved like spilled smoke. "Did you hate me?" he asked. I could have lied and given him comfort he had not earned. I could have told the whole truth and used it like a quart. "No," I said. "I missed you while you were standing right in front of me. That was worse." His eyes shone, but no tears fell. Peter had always been stubborn about witnesses. "I can't be your Aunt Marianne anymore, can I?" The question broke something small and old in me. "You can call me Marianne," I said. He nodded once, like I had handed down a sentence. He left the cookie on the table. People think revenge is the moment the other person loses something. It isn't. Not if you loved them. The loss spreads out and takes ordinary shapes. It is the empty place across from you at lunch. It is seeing a length of rope and remembering a boy's hands learning a bowline. It is catching yourself saving the heel of bread because he used to like it fried in bacon grease, then throwing it to the chickens because he is 40 now and gone from you in a way no truck can fix. I kept my job. I kept the cottage. I got a formal title on a stewardship board and a state auditor who answered my emails with blessedly short sentences. The high ridge rested that summer, and by September, the side oats grama had seeded out in copper flags along the slope. The stock pond fence came down. I made Peter hire our regular crew to do it properly, and I stood there while they pulled every post. He did not come. In October, after the first frost silvered the barn roof, I carried the logbooks back to the well house. Nora offered to help, but I told her no. Some things you do alone, not because help is unwelcome, but because the weight belongs to you. The safe was heavier than I remembered, or I was older than I preferred. Both could be true. I set it on a furniture dolly, dragged it across the gravel, and lowered it into the hole beneath the southwest corner. Before I closed the lid, I added the newest book. March through September. High ridge. Rested. Fence removed. Easement H-17 revoked. Stewardship board established. Watch pond bank recovery. No grazing until spring review. My handwriting shook a little on the last line. I wrapped the books in oilcloth, set them inside, and let my thumb rest on the dent Peter had made when he was 17, and still thought buried paper was treasure. I could see him so clearly for a second. Sunburned nose, 2 big gloves, laughing as I scolded him for dropping responsibility on a rock. The dent was still there. Proof of mishandling. Proof of having once held the same weight together. I locked the safe and shoveled caliche back over it until the floor looked undisturbed. Outside, the wind moved over the ranch with its old, dry voice. The well pump clicked on, then off, remembering water in the dark. Before I left, I stood in the doorway with the shovel in my hand and said the words my grandfather used to write at the top of every pasture entry. Words I had once told Peter were half prayer and half warning. What the grass remembers, the water can't forget.